The wagon wheel cracked against a rock, and Theresa Kimball felt the jolt through her spine as she gripped the side rail, her knuckles white beneath the Arizona sun that beat down on Naco like a blacksmith's hammer. She pressed her free hand against her ribs, where the bruises from 3 nights ago still bloomed purple and yellow, a garden of pain she had learned to tend in silence. The October heat of 1883 was unforgiving, and the dust kicked up by the wheels coated everything, including the small leather satchel she clutched that contained the only things she had managed to take when she finally found the courage to leave. Inside that satchel were letters, dozens of them, written to the man she had once believed would cherish her, letters that chronicled her descent into a nightmare dressed in a wedding band. The wagon driver, an older Mexican man named Señor Ramirez, kept his eyes forward as they approached the scattered buildings that made up Naco. He had asked no questions when she hired him in Tombstone, had simply nodded when she said she needed to go somewhere, anywhere that was not where she had been. The town sat right on the border, a place where people came to disappear or start over, where the law was sometimes a suggestion rather than a rule. Theresa was not sure which category she fell into, only that she could not go back to the house in Tombstone where her husband, Martin, would be waking up to find her gone. "Here is good," she said softly as they reached what appeared to be the main street, a dusty thoroughfare lined with a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a handful of other buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. Señor Ramirez helped her down, and she paid him the last of the money she had saved by skipping meals and hiding coins in the flour sack. He tipped his hat and was gone, leaving her standing in the street with her satchel and a terror so complete it felt like drowning on dry land. The sun was climbing higher, and Theresa knew she needed to find work and shelter before nightfall. Martin would come looking for her eventually. He always said she was his, that she belonged to him the way the horses in his stable belonged to him, and he did not let go of his possessions easily. She touched her ribs again, remembering the way his boot had connected with them when she had burned the biscuits, how he had stood over her afterward and told her it was for her own good that she needed to learn. "You look lost, madam." The voice made her jump, and she turned to find a man standing in the shade of the general store's awning. He was tall, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creek water, green-gray and clear. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, denim pants stained with honest dirt, a shirt that had seen better days, and a hat pulled low against the sun. There was something about the way he stood, relaxed but alert, that reminded her of a cougar she had once seen in the mountains, all contained power and watchful intelligence. "I am looking for work," she said, lifting her chin despite the fear that made her voice shake. "And a place to stay." The man stepped forward, and she flinched before she could stop herself. He froze immediately, his hands coming up slowly, palms out, in a gesture of peace that was so unexpected she felt tears prick her eyes. "I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his sun-weathered face and the gun at his hip. "My name is Cade Owens. I work at the ranch just outside town, the Double R. We have been looking for someone to help with the cooking and cleaning at the main house. The owner's wife passed last spring, and he has been managing on his own, but he is getting too old for it." Theresa studied him, trying to determine if this was a trap, if Martin had somehow anticipated her flight and sent someone ahead to catch her. But Cade Owens's eyes were steady and honest, and she had learned to read men's faces in the years of her marriage, had learned to see the storm clouds gathering before the thunder rolled. "I can cook," she said, "and clean. I am a hard worker." "I believe you," Cade said, and he smiled then, a small curve of his mouth that transformed his face. "Come on. I will take you out to meet Mr. Richardson. Fair warning, he is gruff as a bear in springtime, but his bark is worse than his bite." She followed him to where a horse was tied, a sturdy buckskin gelding that turned its head to watch their approach with liquid dark eyes. Cade swung into the saddle with an easy grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle, then reached down to help her up behind him. She hesitated, remembering Martin's hands, rough and demanding, but Cade's grip was firm without being cruel, and when she settled behind him, he waited until she had secured her satchel before urging the horse forward. The ride to the Double R Ranch took nearly 30 minutes, and Theresa spent every moment of it acutely aware of the man in front of her, of the solid warmth of his back against her hands where she held on, of the way he moved with the horse as if they were one creature. The land around them was harsh and beautiful in equal measure, all scrub brush and rocky outcroppings, with mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals, and Theresa felt something in her chest loosen slightly, a knot of tension unwinding by the smallest degree. The ranch house came into view, a sprawling adobe structure surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Cattle dotted the landscape, red and white shapes against the brown earth, and she could hear the sound of men calling to each other, the lowing of the animals, the general noise of a working ranch. Cade reined in the horse near the main house and dismounted, then helped her down with the same careful courtesy he had shown before. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared inside. Theresa stood in the yard, clutching her satchel, and tried not to think about what she would do if Mr. Richardson turned her away. She had no money left, no plan beyond getting away from Martin, and the reality of her situation was beginning to press down on her like a physical weight. The door opened, and Cade emerged followed by a man who had to be Mr. Richardson. He was short and barrel-chested, with a face like old leather and eyes that were sharp and assessing beneath bushy gray brows. He looked her up and down, and Theresa forced herself to meet his gaze, to not drop her eyes the way Martin had always demanded. "Cade says you are looking for work," Mr. Richardson said, his voice gravelly with age and use. "You have experience keeping house." "Yes, sir," Theresa said. "I have been managing a household for 3 years. I can cook most anything, clean, mend, and handle accounts if needed." "You running from something?" The question was blunt, and Theresa felt her breath catch. Mr. Richardson held up a hand before she could answer. "I do not need details, girl. But I need to know if I am going to have trouble showing up at my door." Theresa thought of Martin, of his temper and his fists, of the way he had promised to kill her if she ever tried to leave. She thought of the letters in her satchel, pages and pages of her trying to reach the man she thought she had married, trying to explain, to plead, to somehow make him understand that she was dying by inches under his control. "Maybe," she said honestly. "I do not know. But I am a good worker, and I will earn my keep." Mr. Richardson grunted, then nodded. "Fair enough. Room and board plus $30 a month. You will have the small cottage out back, used to be where my wife's mother stayed before she passed. You start today, and if you are as good as you say, we will get along fine." Relief flooded through Theresa so intensely she felt lightheaded. "Thank you, sir. You will not regret it." "See that I do not," Mr. Richardson said, then stumped back into the house, leaving her alone with Cade. "Come on," Cade said. "I will show you the cottage, give you time to settle in. Supper is usually at 6, but do not worry about cooking tonight. You have had a long day." The cottage was small but clean, a single room with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a wood stove, and a window that looked out over the mountains. There was a rug on the floor, a quilt on the bed, and a lamp on the table. It was simple, but it was hers. And as Cade left her there with promises to return if she needed anything, Theresa sat down on the bed and let herself cry for the first time since she had left Tombstone. The tears came in great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body, a release of all the fear and pain and desperate hope she had been holding inside. She cried for the girl she had been, who had believed in love and happy endings, and for the woman she had become, who knew that sometimes survival was the only victory you could claim. When the tears finally subsided, she felt hollow but strangely lighter, as if she had set down a burden she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand upright. She unpacked her satchel, hanging her 2 spare dresses on the pegs by the door, setting out her brush and the small bar of soap she had brought. The letters she left in the satchel, unable to look at them yet, unable to face the evidence of her own foolishness. Later, she told herself. She would deal with them later. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Theresa rose before dawn to start the fires and make breakfast for Mr. Richardson and the ranch hands who ate at the main house. She cooked huge pots of beans and cornbread, fried steaks and potatoes, baked pies and biscuits until her arms ached. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washed and mended clothes, and slowly began to learn the rhythms of ranch life. The men treated her with a courtesy that was both unexpected and overwhelming. They removed their hats when they came inside, said please and thank you, and never raised their voices in her presence. Mr. Richardson was gruff but fair, and he paid her at the end of each week, counting out the coins with careful precision. But it was Cade who surprised her the most. He seemed to always be nearby, not hovering but present, a steady, quiet presence that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. He helped her carry heavy pots, fixed the door on the cottage when it stuck, and brought her wildflowers he found on the range, presenting them with a shy smile that made her heart do strange things in her chest. They talked while she cooked, about the ranch, about the land, about nothing and everything. He told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about drifting west in search of something he could not quite name. "I think I was looking for a place to belong," he said one evening as she rolled out dough for biscuits, and he sat at the kitchen table, ostensibly mending a bridle but mostly just watching her work. "Somewhere that felt like home. Did you find it?" she asked, not looking up from the dough. "I think maybe I am starting to," he said, and when she glanced at him, he was looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. She wanted to tell him about Martin, about the fear that still woke her in the night, about the way she could not seem to relax completely because she was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind years of shame and silence. Instead, she focused on the biscuits, cutting them into neat circles and placing them on the baking sheet with careful precision. It was a month after her arrival that everything changed. Theresa had been writing in her journal, something she had started doing in the evenings as a way to process the tumult of emotions that seemed to always be churning inside her. But on this particular night, she found herself pulling out the letters instead, spreading them across her small table like tarot cards that could tell her fortune. She read through them with a strange detachment, as if they had been written by someone else entirely. The first letters were hopeful, full of love and attempts to understand, to bridge the growing distance between her and Martin. But as they progressed, they became desperate, pleading, the words of a woman trying to hold together something that was already shattered beyond repair. There were letters apologizing for imagined slights, letters promising to do better, letters begging him to stop, to please just stop. She was so absorbed in reading that she did not hear the knock on her door, did not notice Cade until he called her name softly from outside. She jumped up, hastily trying to gather the letters, but her hands were shaking and they scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. "Theresa," Cade's voice was concerned now. "Are you all right? I saw your light and wanted to make sure everything was okay." She opened the door, and he took one look at her face, at the tears streaming down her cheeks, and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes fell on the letters scattered across the floor, and he knelt, picking one up before she could stop him. "Please do not," she whispered, but he was already reading, his face growing darker with each line. He read through 3 letters in complete silence, and Theresa stood frozen, watching as his jaw clenched tighter and tighter. When he finally looked up at her, his eyes were blazing with an anger that made her take an involuntary step back. But then he seemed to realize he was frightening her, and the anger banked immediately, replaced by something that looked like anguish. "He hurt you," Cade said, "and it was not a question. That is why you flinched when I first approached you. That is why you still startle when someone moves too quickly." Theresa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Cade stood slowly, gathering the rest of the letters with careful movements, stacking them together into a neat pile. He held them in his hands, and she could see the way his fingers tightened on the paper, crumpling the edges. "Where is he now?" Cade asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Tombstone," Theresa said. "I left while he was passed out drunk. He does not know where I went." Cade nodded, then walked to the wood stove. He opened the door and the fire inside crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He held the letters over the flames, and Theresa found herself moving forward, her hand outstretched. "Wait," she said. "Those are all I have. They are proof of what happened, of what I went through." Cade turned to look at her, and his eyes were infinitely gentle. "You do not need proof, Theresa. You know what happened. You lived it. These letters, they are keeping you tied to him, keeping you locked in that place. You cannot move forward if you are always looking back." "But what if I forget?" she whispered. "What if I forget how bad it was and I go back?" "You will not forget," Cade said. "The scars run too deep for that. But you do not need these reminders. You do not need to keep carrying his poison around with you." He held the letters out to her, offering her the choice. "I will not burn them if you do not want me to. This is your decision. But if you let me, I think we should start fresh. Both of us." Theresa looked at the letters, at the physical manifestation of her pain and fear and brokenness. She thought about the girl who had written them, who had believed that if she just tried hard enough, loved enough, bent enough, she could fix something that had never been whole to begin with. And she thought about the woman she wanted to become, the one who was learning to laugh again, who looked forward to her conversations with a green-eyed cowboy, who was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved better. "Burn them," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Burn them all." Cade fed the letters into the fire one by one, and they watched together as the pages curled and blackened, as her words turned to ash and smoke that drifted up the chimney and out into the night sky. When the last letter had been consumed, Cade closed the stove door and turned to her. "Start fresh," he said softly, and held out his hand. Theresa took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers, the way he held her hand as if it were something precious. "Start fresh," she echoed, and felt something shift inside her. A door closing on the past and another one opening onto a future she could not quite see but was beginning to hope for. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Without the letters weighing on her, Theresa found herself lighter, more able to engage with the world around her. She smiled more easily, laughed at jokes the ranch hands made, and most importantly, she stopped flinching every time someone moved quickly or raised their voice. Cade was always there, a constant, steady presence that never demanded anything of her, but seemed content just to be near her. They took to walking in the evenings after supper, strolling through the ranch grounds as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Cade told her stories about the cattle drives he had been on, about sleeping under the stars and waking to the sound of coyotes howling. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents who had died of cholera when she was 17, about how she had met Martin at a church social and thought he was charming and sophisticated. "He was so different at first," she said one evening as they sat on a fence rail and watched the horses in the corral. "Attentive and kind. He brought me flowers and told me I was beautiful. I thought I was lucky." "When did it change?" Cade asked quietly. "After we married," Theresa said. "It was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, nothing I did was right. I cooked the wrong things, cleaned the wrong way, spoke when I should have been silent. At first it was just words, criticism that felt like paper cuts. Then one day he hit me for the first time, and afterward he cried and apologized and swore it would never happen again." "But it did," Cade said. "It always did," Theresa confirmed. "And every time he found a way to make it my fault. I burned dinner. I looked at another man. I did not show him enough respect. After a while I started to believe him, started to think that maybe I was the problem." Cade was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You were never the problem, Theresa. What he did to you, that was not about you. That was about him being a coward and a bully who got off on having power over someone he knew would not fight back." "I should have left sooner," she said. "I should have been braver." "You left," Cade said, turning to look at her. "That took more courage than anything else you could have done. You saved yourself. That is not nothing." Theresa felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different from the tears she had shed before, cleaner somehow, born of release rather than pain. "Thank you," she said, "for burning the letters, for seeing me as more than just a victim." "I see a survivor," Cade said. "I see a woman who is strong and kind and who makes the best apple pie I have ever tasted. I see someone I would very much like to know better, if you would let me." Theresa's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I would like that too," she said softly. "But I am scared, Cade. I am scared of trusting someone again, of getting it wrong again." "Then we will take it slow," Cade said. "As slow as you need. I am not going anywhere, Theresa. I will wait as long as it takes." True to his word, Cade was patient in a way that astonished her. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel as though she owed him anything for his kindness. Instead, he courted her with a sweetness that made her fall for him a little more each day. He brought her coffee in the mornings, exactly the way she liked it. He taught her to ride properly, spending hours in the corral with her as she learned to trust the horse beneath her. He read to her in the evenings, his voice rumbling through adventure stories and poetry that made her laugh and cry in equal measure. And slowly, carefully, Theresa began to heal. The nightmares that had plagued her began to fade, replaced by dreams of wide open spaces and a future that did not terrify her. She stopped looking over her shoulder every time she went into town, stopped jumping at sudden noises, stopped waiting for the blow that never came. She learned that not all men were like Martin, that kindness was not a mask hiding cruelty, that love could be gentle and patient and real. It was a cold November evening when everything changed again. Theresa was in the kitchen of the main house, kneading bread dough, when Mr. Richardson came in with a troubled expression on his weathered face. "Got a man here asking about you," he said without preamble. "Says his name is Martin Kimball, says you are his wife, and he has come to take you home." The dough fell from Theresa's hands, hitting the table with a soft thud. All the blood drained from her face and her legs suddenly felt too weak to hold her. "No," she whispered. "No, he cannot be here. He is in town," Mr. Richardson said. "Showed up about an hour ago, asking around for a woman matching your description. One of the boys heard him and came to warn us. I sent Cade and a couple of the others into town to keep an eye on things." Theresa's mind was racing, panic clawing at her throat. Martin was here. After 2 months, he had finally found her, and he would not leave without her. She knew him well enough to know that his pride would not allow it, that he would see her leaving as a theft of his property that needed to be rectified. "What am I going to do?" she asked, hating the way her voice shook. "That depends," Mr. Richardson said, studying her with those sharp eyes. "Do you want to go back to him?" "No," Theresa said immediately, vehemently. "I would rather die than go back." "Then you will not go," Mr. Richardson said simply. "This is my ranch and you are under my protection. He wants to take you. He will have to go through me and every man who works here. And I do not think he is going to want to try that." Before Theresa could respond, the door burst open and Cade strode in, his face dark with anger. Behind him came 2 other ranch hands, and between them, they were half dragging, half carrying Martin. Theresa's husband looked smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow without the power of her fear to make him larger. He was drunk. She could smell the whiskey on him from across the room, and his face was red with rage. When he saw her, his eyes lit up with a possessive fury that made her stomach turn. "There you are," Martin snarled. "You ungrateful little witch. Do you have any idea what you put me through? Running off like that, making me look like a fool. Let go of me," he said to the ranch hands, struggling against their grip. "That is my wife. I have a right to take her home." "You do not have any rights here," Cade said, his voice deadly calm, "and you are not taking her anywhere." Martin's eyes swung to Cade and he sneered. "And who are you supposed to be? Her new man. You think you are going to keep her. She belongs to me. We are married in the eyes of God and the law." "A marriage stopped being a marriage the first time you raised your hand to her," Cade said. "You lost any claim to her when you made her afraid to sleep at night." "You do not know what you are talking about," Martin spat. "She is dramatic, always making things seem worse than they are. I disciplined her when she needed it, the way any man disciplines his wife." "That is not discipline," Theresa said, surprised to hear her own voice, strong and steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "That is abuse. You beat me, Martin. You terrorized me. You made me believe I was worthless and stupid and deserved everything you did to me." "You did deserve it," Martin said viciously. "You were a terrible wife, could not do anything right, could not even give me a child." "Thank God for that," Theresa said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "Thank God I never brought a child into that hell." Martin lunged forward and the ranch hands tightened their grip, hauling him back. "You are coming home with me," he shouted. "Right now, you are my wife." "No," Theresa said, and the word felt like freedom. "I am not going anywhere with you. I would rather die. I would rather walk into the desert and never come back than spend another minute under your control." "You do not have a choice," Martin said. "The law says you are mine." "The law is not here right now," Mr. Richardson said, speaking up for the first time. "And what we have here is a man who showed up drunk on my property, harassing one of my employees. Way I see it, we would be well within our rights to defend her." Martin seemed to realize, finally, that he was outnumbered and outgunned. His face went from red to purple and spittle flew from his lips as he shouted. "This is not over. You are my wife, Theresa. You made vows. You cannot just walk away." "Watch me," Theresa said. "I am done with you, Martin. I am done being afraid. I am done being your punching bag. Go back to Tombstone and find someone else to torment, because I am never coming back." "Boys," Mr. Richardson said, nodding to the ranch hands. Escort Mr. Kimball off the property. Make sure he understands that if he comes back, we will not be as hospitable." They dragged Martin out, his curses echoing through the house until the door slammed shut behind them. Theresa stood in the kitchen, trembling from head to toe, and then Cade was there, wrapping his arms around her and holding her tight against his chest. "It is all right," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe. He is gone and he will not be back." "How can you be sure?" Theresa asked, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Because if he is, I will kill him," Cade said simply. "I do not say that lightly, Theresa, but I mean it. He will never hurt you again. I promise you that." Theresa pulled back to look up at him, at this man who had shown her what real strength looked like, what real love could be. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I know it is too soon, and I know I am probably not ready, but I do. I love you, Cade Owens." Cade's face transformed, his smile so bright it rivaled the sun. "I love you too," he said. "I have loved you since the day I found you standing in the street looking lost and scared and so damned brave. I will love you for the rest of my life if you will let me." "Yes," Theresa said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will let you." He kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise, and Theresa felt the last of her fear melt away. This was what love was supposed to feel like, she realized. Safe and warm and right. Not a cage but a shelter. Not a demand but a gift freely given. The next morning they rode into Naco together. Theresa was determined to face down any lingering fears, to reclaim her place in the world as a woman who was free and unafraid. They went to the general store, where she bought fabric for a new dress, and to the church, where they spoke with the minister about the possibility of an annulment from Martin based on abandonment and cruelty. The minister, a kind-faced man named Father Gonzalez, listened to her story with compassion and promised to help in any way he could. "God does not intend for marriage to be a prison," he said gently. "You did the right thing in leaving my child. And I will do everything in my power to ensure that you are free to build a new life." It took nearly 6 months for the annulment to be finalized, 6 months during which Theresa and Cade grew closer with each passing day. They spent their evenings together, talking and laughing and slowly building a foundation of trust that felt unshakable. Cade never pushed her for more than she was ready to give, content to hold her hand and steal the occasional kiss, always asking permission, always making sure she felt safe. When the papers finally came through declaring her marriage to Martin null and void, Theresa cried tears of relief and joy. She was free, truly free for the first time in years. That evening, Cade took her for a ride up into the mountains, to a spot where they could see for miles in every direction. The sun was setting, painting the sky in glorious colors, and Theresa felt as though she could breathe properly for the first time in forever. "Marry me," Cade said suddenly, and she turned to find him on one knee, holding a simple gold band. "I know we said we would take things slow, and if you want to wait, we can wait. But I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Theresa. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to build a life with you, have children with you if you want them, grow old with you. So please say you will marry me." Theresa did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet and kissing him with all the love and passion she had been holding inside. "Yes, I will marry you, today, tomorrow, whenever you want. Yes." They were married a month later in the small church in Naco, with Mr. Richardson standing as witness and half the town in attendance. Theresa wore a dress she had sewn herself from the fabric she had bought, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Cade wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back and his eyes shining with happiness. When Father Gonzalez pronounced them husband and wife, Cade kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart overflow. The reception was held at the ranch, with music and dancing and more food than Theresa had ever seen in one place. The ranch hands congratulated them with genuine warmth, and Mr. Richardson pulled her aside at one point to press an envelope into her hands. "For you and Cade," he said gruffly. "To help you get started, there is a piece of land adjacent to the ranch that I have been thinking about selling. Good grazing, a creek that runs year-round, would make a fine place to build a house and start your own herd. If you are interested, we can work out terms." Theresa threw her arms around the old man, who grumbled but hugged her back. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. You saved my life." "You saved yourself," Mr. Richardson said, echoing Cade's words from months ago. "I just gave you a place to land." Cade and Theresa moved into the cottage together as husband and wife. And for the first few weeks, Theresa could hardly believe her good fortune. She would wake in the night sometimes, disoriented, expecting to find Martin beside her, and then Cade would pull her close and murmur reassurances until she fell back asleep. Slowly, those nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of the future they were building together. They spent their first year of marriage working side by side, saving every penny they could toward buying the land from Mr. Richardson. Theresa continued to cook and clean at the main house, and Cade worked the cattle, but their evenings and Sundays were their own. They rode out to the piece of land Mr. Richardson had mentioned, walking the boundaries and planning where they would build their house, where the barn would go, how many head of cattle they could support. "We will build it slow," Cade said, his arm around her shoulders as they stood on a small rise overlooking a valley. "Start small and add on as we can afford it. It might take years, but we will get there." "I do not care how long it takes," Theresa said. "As long as I am with you, I am home." By the end of their first year of marriage, they had saved enough for a down payment on the land, and Mr. Richardson drew up the papers with a smile. "You two are going to do well," he said. "I can see it. You have got the work ethic and the heart for it." Building the house was a labor of love that took the better part of a year. Cade and some of the ranch hands did most of the heavy work, but Theresa helped where she could, mixing adobe and carrying water and learning skills she had never imagined she would need. The house was small, just 3 rooms to start, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and filled with their dreams. They moved in on a warm spring evening in 1886, carrying their few possessions across the threshold, and Cade insisted on carrying Theresa as well, making her laugh with delight. That night, they made love in their own bed in their own house on their own land, and Theresa felt a completeness she had never known existed. 3 months later, she realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. She had not forgotten Martin's cruel words about her failure to give him a child, and part of her worried that there was something wrong with her. But Dr. Miller, the physician in Naco, examined her and pronounced her perfectly healthy. "You have nothing to worry about, Mrs. Owens," he said kindly. "Some women just need the right circumstances to conceive. You are young and strong. You should have no problems." Cade was over the moon when she told him, picking her up and spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Theresa asked later that night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Cade said. "I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can hardly stand it. This baby is going to be so loved, Theresa, so wanted. Everything you deserved and did not get, we are going to give to this child." Their son was born on a freezing January morning in 1887, entering the world with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to anyone within earshot. Cade was there for the birth, holding Theresa's hand and whispering encouragement, and when Dr. Miller placed the baby in her arms, Theresa looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "What should we name him?" Cade asked, touching the baby's downy head with gentle fingers. "James," Theresa said immediately. "After your father." Cade's eyes filled with tears and he kissed her forehead. "James Owens," he said. "Welcome to the world, son." The years that followed were the happiest of Theresa's life. Their ranch grew slowly but steadily, the herd increasing each year, their house expanding to accommodate their growing family. 2 years after James was born, their daughter Margaret arrived, dark-haired and fierce from the moment she took her first breath. 3 years after that, another son, Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful and seemed to observe the world with ancient eyes. Theresa watched her children grow with a joy that never faded, marveling at the way they were so free and unafraid, so secure in the knowledge that they were loved. She taught them to read and write, to cook and sew, to ride and rope. Cade taught them the ways of the ranch, how to care for the animals, how to read the land and the weather, how to be honest and fair in their dealings with others. On their 10th anniversary, Cade surprised her with a trip to Tombstone. Theresa had not been back since the day she left, and she felt a flutter of nervousness as they rode into town. But it looked different now, smaller and less threatening, just another dusty frontier town rather than the site of her personal hell. They walked down the main street hand in hand, and Theresa felt a sense of closure settling over her. This place had no power over her anymore. She was not the frightened, broken woman who had fled in the night. She was Theresa Owens, wife and mother, rancher and survivor, a woman who had built a life she loved from the ashes of one that had tried to destroy her. "Are you all right?" Cade asked, watching her face carefully. "I am perfect," Theresa said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Let us go home." They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their children ran out to meet them, James whooping with excitement, Margaret demanding to know what they had brought her, Thomas attaching himself to Cade's leg like a limpet. Inside the house, there was supper to make and stories to tell, baths to give and prayers to say. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Theresa and Cade sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. He had his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her side. "You ever regret it?" Cade asked quietly. "Everything you went through to get here." Theresa thought about the question, really considered it. She thought about the girl she had been, naive and trusting and so easily hurt. She thought about the years with Martin, the pain and fear and slow erosion of her sense of self. She thought about the night she had run, terrified and alone, with no idea what the future held. And she thought about everything that had come after, the healing and the growth and the slow building of a life that felt real and true. "No," she said finally. "Because it led me here to you, to this life. I would not wish what happened on anyone, but I cannot regret it because without it, I would not be who I am now. I would not have you. I would not have our children. I would not have learned how strong I really am." "You are the strongest person I know," Cade said, kissing the top of her head, "and the bravest, and I will never stop being grateful that you walked into my life that day in Naco." "I am the grateful one," Theresa said. "You saw me when I could barely see myself. You gave me back my life. You showed me what love is supposed to look like." "We saved each other," Cade said. "That is what people who love each other do." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. James grew tall and serious, taking to ranch work with a dedication that made Cade beam with pride. Margaret was wild and fearless, riding like the wind and refusing to be confined by anyone's expectations of what a girl should be. Thomas became a reader, devouring every book he could get his hands on, dreaming of seeing the world beyond the ranch. By the time their 20th anniversary rolled around in 1904, the ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. They had nearly 1,000 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and 3 ranch hands who had been with them for years. The house had been expanded twice, and there was talk of building a proper barn to replace the old ramshackle structure they had been making do with. Theresa was in the kitchen, preparing supper for the family and the hands when Cade came in with a letter. She wiped her hands on her apron and took it, noting the official-looking seal. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it," Cade said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Theresa broke the seal and unfolded the letter, reading it twice to make sure she understood. It was from an attorney in Tombstone, informing her that Martin Kimball had died of liver failure 3 months earlier. In his will, he had left her a small sum of money and a note that simply said, "I am sorry." Theresa stared at the letter for a long moment, feeling a complex tangle of emotions. Relief that he was truly gone, that the shadow of him could never touch her or her family again. Sadness for the waste of a life, for the man he could have been if he had chosen differently. And finally, a sense of peace, of a door closing on a chapter that had been over for years, but somehow never quite finished. "Are you all right?" Cade asked, his hand warm on her shoulder. "I am fine," Theresa said, folding the letter and setting it aside. "It is just strange, you know, to think that he is gone. Part of me always thought he would show up again someday, that I would have to face him one more time. And now you never will," Cade said. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Good," Theresa said without hesitation. "It is good. I do not wish death on anyone, but I am not going to pretend I am sad about this. He made his choices and he lived with the consequences. I made mine and I got this life. I would say I came out ahead." That evening, after supper was eaten and the dishes were washed, and the children had drifted off to their own pursuits, Theresa took the letter outside. She stood in the yard, looking at the house they had built, the land they had tamed, the life they had created. And she thought about the girl she had been 21 years ago, standing in the street in Naco with nothing but a satchel and a desperate hope. She thought about the letters Cade had burned, about the way he had offered her a chance to start fresh, to leave the past behind and build something new. And she realized that she had done exactly that. She had created a new story for herself, one where she was not a victim but a hero, not broken but beautifully whole. Theresa touched a match to the corner of the attorney's letter and watched as it caught fire, the paper curling and blackening. She let it burn down to her fingertips, then dropped the last fragment and ground it into the dirt with her boot. "Goodbye, Martin," she said softly. "I hope you found some peace at the end." Then she turned and walked back into her house, where Cade was reading to Thomas and Margaret was showing James a new trick she had taught her horse. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene, memorizing this moment of perfect domestic contentment. Cade looked up and met her eyes, and the love in his gaze was so complete, so unshakable, that Theresa felt tears prick her eyes. 21 years, she thought. 21 years since he had found her lost and afraid, since he had burned her letters and told her to start fresh. And in those 21 years, they had built this life, this family, this love that felt like a miracle. "Come sit," Cade said, patting the space beside him on the sofa. "Thomas wants to hear about the time we fought off the mountain lion." "That was your father," Theresa said, settling in beside him and letting him pull her close. "I just threw a pan at it. Best throw I ever saw, Cade said, grinning. Bounced that pan right off its nose and sent it running. The children laughed, and Theresa let herself relax into the warmth and noise and love of her family. This was everything she had never known she wanted, everything she had been too afraid to dream of during those dark years with Martin. And she had it now, had earned it through her courage and her willingness to take a chance on a green-eyed cowboy who had seen past her fear to the woman she could become. As the years continued to unfold, Theresa and Cade watched their children grow into adults and start families of their own. James married a sweet-natured girl from town and brought her to live on the ranch, building a house on the far side of the property and working beside his father every day. Margaret, true to form, married a rodeo rider and followed him across the West, sending letters filled with tales of adventure and excitement. Thomas went east to college and became a teacher, but he came home every summer, bringing books and stories and a gentleness that reminded Theresa of Cade. On their 30th anniversary, Cade took Theresa back to Naco, to the spot where they had first met. The town had grown and changed, but the general store was still there, and they stood in front of it, holding hands and remembering. "I knew," Cade said quietly. "The moment I saw you standing here, I knew you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much." "I was so scared," Theresa said. "I had no idea what I was going to do, where I was going to go, and then there you were, offering me hope when I had none left." "We were both lost," Cade said. "And we found each other. That is the greatest gift I have ever been given." They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, and Theresa looked out over the land they had claimed and tamed, the legacy they were building for their children and grandchildren. She thought about the woman she had been, broken and afraid, and the woman she had become, strong and sure and deeply loved. And she knew that every step of the journey, even the darkest ones, had been worth it to arrive here in this moment, with this man, in this life they had built together. That night, lying in bed with Cade's arms around her, Theresa thought about the letters one more time. The letters she had written to a man who had not deserved her love, who had taken her vulnerability and used it as a weapon. Cade had burned those letters and told her to start fresh, and she had done exactly that. She had built a new story, written it page by page, year by year, with love and courage and hope. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Cade murmured, already half asleep. "For everything," Theresa said. "For seeing me, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Best thing I ever did," Cade said, pulling her closer. "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done, Theresa, and I will keep doing it until the day I die." "And I will love you right back," Theresa said. "Forever." In the years that followed, they became grandparents many times over, their house filling with the laughter and chaos of the next generation. They grew old together, their hands gnarled with work but still reaching for each other, their hair silver but their love as bright as ever. They took evening walks, slower now but just as sweet, talking about everything and nothing, content in the companionship they had built over decades. When Cade died at the age of 79, Theresa mourned him with a grief that was profound but not bitter. They had been married for 53 years, and she had loved him for every single day of them. She stood at his grave and thanked him one more time for burning the letters, for giving her the chance to start fresh, for showing her what real love looked like. She lived another 7 years after his death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them beneficiaries of the love story that had begun in a dusty street in Naco, Arizona, when a scared woman met a kind cowboy who saw her worth. On her last day, her eldest grandson asked her what the secret to a happy life was, and Theresa smiled. "The secret," she said, "is to let go of the past when it no longer serves you, to have the courage to start fresh when you need to, and to love deeply and completely without fear when you find someone who is worthy of that love. Your grandfather taught me all of that, and it made all the difference. She died peacefully that night, surrounded by family, and was buried beside Cade on the land they had built together. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, a testament to what two people could create when they refused to let the past define them and chose instead to build a future based on love, trust, and mutual respect. And though the years turned to decades, and then to centuries, the story of Theresa and Cade endured, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what is destroying you and trust that something better is waiting if you just have the courage to start fresh.